Welcome back from the commercial break. We continue with our discussion, analyzing the economic policies of the country and basically looking at the potential of education and natural resources. As we're breaking for a break, for the commercial break, we realize that there are a number of areas that those who are in the education sector need to look at. The role of the National Council of Higher Education is important. The role played by the parents who sponsor, who fund their children to go to school. It is always, painful whenever parents pay school fees for their children.
Yeah.
But in terms of the career, the job career development, you find it's lacking.
Yeah.
The payment of your school fees, our dear parent outside there, compared to what you want your child to be, and decides what you want your child to be, basically none other than the future productivity force of your child. Because none of us want to pay school fees for your children, and then finally your child, your son, your daughter comes back to you and said, "Daddy, Mommy, I don't have any money even which can buy anything for my care."
Yeah.
At times it has been a practical teasing situation outside there, but real, where you find even a graduate is not able to earn any amount of money that can even assist him to sustain his basic needs.
Yeah.
Buying clothes, buying even the simplest clothes to put on, and it is a very challenging moment. But it goes back on our type of education, the career guidance granted, and the kind of restructured courses. We are dealing now with the global economy beyond the regional integration, which we are talking about East African community, which now in East Africa we have 6-7 countries which have now come together. And we have many across board, of course, the African continent, before we begin to think about Asia, where they are taking our children for that unskilled labor export, which is leading into exploitation and oppression. So for countries to transform, the transformation of developing countries, to me, dear professors, I will come you back, need some in-depth discussion into this. I don't know when we shall achieve it, but we are optimistic that maybe things will turn around. Would you again give us your insight into this?
Okay, so again, if you look at the workforce and the labor workforce, for example, like I've said, it's the empirical evidence is available that tells us or shows us that highly educated economy with the right skilled workforce tend to be very progressing economies. Maybe I'll just take you back slightly. There's a guy called Verley. This was as far back as the 12th century. And he said that a nation that does not educate its women will never progress. Mm-hmm. And that's true. Now, what does that mean? Because when you educate women, they become more productive. But then when you educate women, the chances of the children being educated becomes higher. So when you have educated children, you have higher educated workforce. And what educated workforce does is that it reduces the disparity in terms of pay. There's better equity, regardless of gender, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of wherever part of the world you come from. So there is need to skill. So skill people, educate people. And this education is very important because it is what will increase productivity. You can't grow without enhanced productivity. People need to have better skills. So today when people leave senior 4 or senior 6, everybody wants to acquire further skills. And that's where government needs to think, which I think government is not doing badly in terms of understanding that, yeah, there will be people who leave senior 4, senior 6 is not for them, but there's a route through which they can follow to learn practical skills. In fact, if you look at most developed parts of the world, take the United Kingdom, for example, an average plumber, an average welder earns better salary.
Welder?
Yeah, than the prime minister.
Ah, that's
Yes.
a good story.
Yeah, so not everybody
An
needs,
average welder.
Yeah, not everybody needs university education. There are people whose strength and whose ability and whose interest will be in the more vocational trades where they can earn a living for themselves, where they can also become employers of labor. If I train today to be a welder, or I train today to be a carpenter, or I train today to be a plumber, I can be self-employed. And these are the things that government needs to look at in terms of there are a group of people, a large pool of people who would do better going into the vocational education and end up in vocational trade. Population is increasing. You need people who will fix your toilet. You need people who will tile your floor. You need people who will build your roof. These are people who, when you take them from being uneducated and educating them to that level, you pick them out of poverty. So parents need to think about, allow their children to identify where their interest lies and encourage them.
So it begins with identification of interest.
Yes.
What about the inspiration also? Because there is where...
Yeah, because once the interest is there, then inspiration will be there. For us, an individual, and that's what we try to do at Victoria University, is to identify what's the interest of our student. Because we emphasize, for example, work-integrated learning, experiential learning, but then we want to know what the interest of the student is. And when there's that interest, there is motivation. There are a lot of people who have done well in life, who have come out of poverty because they pursued their interest. I remember growing up as a child, I used to be a good footballer, but my dad beat me out of playing football because
you liked football?
Yeah, because he thought at the time that football was for people who don't have hope. But now, things have changed. Footballers earn in a week what professors earn in a year. So I'm sure if he had a foresight of what is happening today, he wouldn't have discouraged me. So interest matters a lot. Let people identify their interest.
Identify your child
and
interest.
let there be opportunities for people to pursue the interest that they have, and they can do better. I mean, look at these Indian kids who identify themselves to say, oh, I love computing. And right from as early as 3, 4, 5, 6 years of age, they started teaching them coding. And where are they now? They're in Google, they're in Amazon, they're in Apple. And these are the people who are contributing significantly to the growth of
There's something you are interesting me to think about. We have currently there was a thought to not concentrate on nursery education, but I realized there is a need, if anything, now to give it a hand, to consider nursery education as a way of identification of the interest.
Yes.
Dear viewers outside there and the stakeholders who are investing in education, there is something needs to be done, and it has been clearly brought out by Professor. Instead of only taking your child, you call it nursery education, and even what is the primary education. This is a corporate responsibility with the parents outside there and those who are doing the teaching. It should be for identification of interest. I picked that point with the interest, and I felt to grab it and emphasize on it. So when you identify the interest of the child, then that means you are able to know where that child can be inspired in terms of career. But again, as the interest is being identified, there's a need to know the diverse levels of interest.
Absolutely.
What can the state do to ensure this can happen? If the developing economies, the heads of states, and maybe the policymakers basically.
Yeah, I think again it's for government to encourage institutions to ensure that they encourage their children to begin. Okay, let me start by saying that parents have a big role to play. As a parent, you have a responsibility to look at your child and very early stages of that child, identify where their interests are. You see, growing up as Africans, our parents told us what we should be. You must be a doctor, you must be a lawyer, you must be an engineer, any other thing, you're useless. But things have changed now. Engineers are not the best paid, even doctors are not the best paid. There are people who are into, for example, cybersecurity, who earn so much. Big data analytics.
Cybersecurity.
Especially the digital world. That is where a lot of the money is. So I think it's for parents, first of all, to encourage their children, whatever they are good at. That is how innovation starts. And encourage the children. And also university should not just, when people come to study, not just universities, I might go to Nakawa Technical Institute or college, for example, to do carpentry. But the teacher should be able to see my skills and think, oh, I think you're better off being an electrician rather than a carpenter. Because you see the skills of the person, you see where the interest is. So I think parents and then teachers have that specific role and responsibility to identify the interest of their students or their children, our students if they are teachers, and help them to develop those interests. Because when people do things that they're interested in, you don't need, the passion is there, they pursue it day or night, even if they are not succeeding, but because the interest is there, they keep pushing until they become successful. And we have seen people all over the world, good examples of people who, because they pursued their passion, they pursued their interest, they've been able to make a difference in this world. And that is exactly how we should allow people to pursue their interest. Create the government's responsibility now is to create an enabling environment that allows people to pursue their interest.
Yeah, back to the issue of interest, I realize there's something which the dear viewers we need to agree on. Before you have an interest, you must have knowledge about the interest.
Absolutely.
And what I think right now we are doing is to share with you information that can be translated into knowledge.
Yeah.
And the information at hand, what we were saying, especially structuring of our education, we should start from nursery up to university and availing the information. I don't know who will do this, but we have the Ministry of Education and ICT, information dissemination, and intending to groom up a generation, not by the age of 18, but from as one is born, 2 years, 3 years old, the kind of the films you show your children at home when they are viewing TVs, let it be in an area to develop the interest of the child. I believe, Professor, my commentary is right.
Absolutely.
That's what you meant.
Yes.
And also, looking at, if we are talking about the national, regional, and global job market, we identify the current, paradigm shift from the traditional to the current trend.
Yeah.
So that it is able to indicate, you are able to indicate if you are at the nursery level, you are a tutor, you are the one who is managing that nursery school at the nursery level, avail a list of available interests. And I am referring to interests as opportunities as well. Yeah. Because out of those, where you get interest is where you've seen an opportunity. Yeah. If it is sports, it is engineering, it is metal welding, those who are in a garage, and you call it as an interest. It becomes an interest. Someone can be an engineer, become an interested engineer, not necessarily to first wait finish senior 4. Yeah, because we normally think that to be an engineer, you must first finish university. And again, what you said, I want to emphasize on it. Yeah. Some parents think that maybe if your child has gone to the garage to go into, mechanics, that is as if he's a failure. Yeah. If one has gone to maybe military, to study military science and security studies, as if that one, or they say as if he's a failure. Yeah. Would you inspire more about the viewers about that?
Yeah, so in today's world, I think it's allow people to do what they're interested in doing. When people can create value, how does someone become independent, financially independent? You need to be able to create value. You need to be able to create solutions to things. There are people who didn't do engineering, medicine, or law that are doing well, doing extremely well in their various professions. So I think parents should not be very stereotypical, and tell their children, oh, if you don't do this, you're a failure. No, allow them pursue where their interest is. I think what is important is when they choose a career or when they decide to choose a discipline, they should take a discipline where their interests lie. Whatever you do today, whatever you study, whether at technical institute or at the university, there is something you can do out there in the market. But what is critical is that people attend programs and courses also that has put into consideration what the future market looks like, what the job market of the future is. What's happening in the Western world is that when you are designing curriculum now, you put employability at the center of whatever you do. What are these students able to do when they graduate? Am I teaching students mass communication and they graduate here out of the university with a degree in mass communication? They can't even take good photos and they did photography. They can't even produce
and studied mass communication.
And we live now in a world where you have a huge digital space to practice even when you're a student. You have YouTube, you have social media, and these are things. What have you done? These days, when you go to look for a job in BBC or you want to look for a job in CNN, you don't just go there for an interview. You go there to present a portfolio of things that you have done, a portfolio of productions that you have made. So it's not about the knowing, it's about what can you do.
It's not even about the document. You present, you say, this is my CV, then you scan your degree certificate.
Not even that now. Show us, give us a portfolio of what you have produced, what you have done on YouTube, what you have done on social media. We want to see.
Recently, I met someone and was interested in a job. That specific job, I said, you go and do this and do this. And after you have done this, then you do this. After I've done this, then I know you can do a job. Yeah. The kind of interviews, these days they have tried to modify them. First to call that one, which of course they retain the oral, but the real one of it should be practical.
Absolutely.
I agree with you, Professor, and that is very important. And we will be going for a commercial break in the next 3 minutes. But before we go for the commercial break, we realize that the natural resources which we have and the linkage of our education is expected to be looking at our variable natural resources. You educate me to do what? Besides the other wider perspective of education. Yeah. For us, when we were studying, you had your story. I also have my story. When we were, in the early primary education, early stage of education, we used to know at home that we were, agriculturalists in a sense of animal husbandry, in that area of animal husbandry, and also crop production, animal husbandry and crop production. Yeah. So I read, I was able to have a project of cows, to have goats, to have cows, to have, rearing animals. Yeah. But by that time, it was not of a high skill. And I believe if I was connected to a school which they could inspire me more to like that project, even I would not have, I think, bothered to go and maybe pursue a PhD. I would have me concentrated in having maybe how many cows do I need to have. And there's a way how they have it, that cultural economic background, which links up to know how you are going to utilize the environment around you is what you talked about. Yeah. And it has economic potential. This is lacking in our day-to-day. I don't know what may be a difference between us here in Uganda and the difference maybe what is in Nigeria. I use it an example as our home country. Yeah. Because we understand very well that in most cases, because of that environment, utilizing the environment, everyone wants to do business, want to do trade, and want to do something and succeed. Everyone is on run. Business is being pursued at a high terrific speed. Yeah. What propels that to happen in Nigeria? Because you are one of our leading economies, much as you are not the best.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, it depends on if you look at different people have different skills.
And again, as you come in that, are the opportunities maybe being triggered by the way how you're able for you to utilize your petroleum faster and compared to us? We continue to compare that?
I think when it comes to the utilization of the petroleum resources in Nigeria, Nigeria is not a very good example. Things have changed. Lots of improvement have been made, and but when it came to natural resource exploitation, Nigeria didn't start well. After more than 50 years of oil and gas exploration, they've made a lot of money out of it, but they haven't utilized it effectively. So that's one of the biggest problems. Just recently, for example, the National Oil Company, NNPC, has been incorporated to run more like a private entity, which is something they should have done 50 years ago.
As a private entity, it has been a government entity.
Yeah, it's been wholly a government entity because, of course, it's the cash cow of government. But if you compare the likes of Statoil of Norway, it has always run as an independent entity with the interest of government in it. And about 20, 30 years ago or thereabout, the Brazilians did the same thing with their petroleum company, Petrobras, which became a commercially, so they privatized Petrobras. And what happened? You have seen how Petrobras have grown over the years.
Professor, we are going for a short break and you'll build on that. We want to have that analysis proper and we maybe project the economic fortunes of Uganda in the utilization of petroleum because it's one of our key natural resources. Thank you. Stay tuned on Smart 24 TV. We must use the potential we have to develop our economies.